Most people confuse attention with emotional loyalty because attention feels intimate in the beginning. The messages arrive fast. The curiosity feels endless. They notice small things about you without effort. Your presence affects their mood. Your silence gets questioned. Your absence gets felt. And slowly, your brain starts translating attention into emotional safety. That's where the mistake begins. Because attention and loyalty are not the same emotional experience. Attention is stimulation. Loyalty is restraint. And people are often loyal to what they value, while still giving attention to what temporarily excites them. That's the part nobody wants to admit out loud. Someone can think about you constantly and still emotionally betray you in silence. Someone can watch your stories every night and still slowly detach from you emotionally. Someone can text you all day while secretly becoming less emotionally invested every week. Because attention is easy. Attention costs almost nothing now. A few words. A reaction. A late-night conversation. A compliment sent at 2:14 a.m. because loneliness suddenly became unbearable. But loyalty requires something much more uncomfortable. Consistency when excitement fades. And most people are not prepared for that version of connection. That's why attention feels so dangerous emotionally. It creates the illusion of importance before importance actually exists. You start feeling chosen before you've truly been valued. And eventually, you become emotionally dependent on reactions that were never stable enough to trust. That's when people slowly stop recognizing themselves. You notice it in small, humiliating moments first. You check whether they viewed your story. You reread conversations searching for emotional reassurance hidden between ordinary sentences. You pretend not to care how long they take to reply, while checking your phone every few minutes anyway. You tell yourself you're simply overthinking. But deep down, you already feel the emotional imbalance forming. Because attention changes people. Especially when it becomes inconsistent. Consistent affection feels calming. Inconsistent affection feels addictive. And addiction creates emotional confusion that people mistake for deep connection all the time. That's why some people become obsessed with individuals who barely emotionally choose them. Not because the connection feels safe. Because uncertainty intensifies emotional focus. You begin analyzing tiny behavioral shifts like survival depends on it. One colder reply suddenly ruins your entire night. A delayed response creates panic that feels irrational even to you. Their mood becomes the emotional weather inside your head. And the terrifying part is realizing how quickly emotional dependency destroys personal stability. You stop speaking naturally. You start speaking carefully. You begin calculating how emotionally available you should appear. Too distant feels risky. Too attached feels embarrassing. So you exist somewhere in the middle, constantly editing yourself for emotional survival. And eventually the connection stops feeling natural entirely. It becomes psychological maintenance. You start waiting for reactions more than conversations. Waiting for proof. Waiting for enthusiasm. Waiting for emotional reassurance that used to happen automatically. That's usually where emotional exhaustion begins. Because attention has a cruel pattern most people never notice until it damages them. The more available someone becomes, the less emotionally stimulating they sometimes feel. Not because they became less valuable. Because certainty slowly removes tension. And tension is often what emotionally intoxicates people in the beginning. That's why attention feels strongest during uncertainty. During the chase. During emotional unpredictability. During the fear of losing access. But once emotional access becomes guaranteed, people often stop observing each other the same way. Familiarity kills observation. You notice it slowly. They stop reacting when you walk into the room. Conversations become updates instead of emotional experiences. The curiosity fades first. Then the effort. Then the emotional attentiveness. And eventually you realize you're carrying most of the emotional atmosphere alone. That realization changes something inside people. Especially when they remember how intense the attention used to feel. Because the beginning becomes psychologically haunting. You compare the present version of them against the version that once made you feel intensely noticed. The version that replied instantly. The version that asked deeper questions. The version that stayed awake talking to you for hours. The version that made your existence feel emotionally significant. And now they seem distracted while you're speaking. Now they scroll while you talk. Now, "I'm tired" replaces emotional intimacy. Now their attention feels partial. And partial attention creates a very specific kind of loneliness. The loneliness of technically having someone, while emotionally feeling yourself disappear beside them. That's the kind of pain people struggle explaining. Because nothing dramatic happened. No betrayal. No explosion. No official ending. Just a slow emotional reduction. A gradual lowering of emotional priority. And somehow that hurts worse. Because emotional distance becomes impossible to confront when it arrives quietly. You begin questioning your own perception. Maybe they're stressed. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe this is just what comfort looks like. But deep down, you feel the difference between being emotionally desired and emotionally accommodated. And once someone feels accommodated instead of desired, their entire emotional identity inside the relationship starts collapsing. You become hyper-aware of everything. How fast they reply to others. How alive they sound around strangers. How easily they laugh with people they barely know. Meanwhile, your conversations start feeling rehearsed. Predictable. Emotionally safe in the worst possible way. That's when insecurity becomes humiliating. Because you start competing against versions of them you no longer receive. You don't miss who they are now. You miss how intensely they used to notice you. And eventually your self-respect begins negotiating with your attachment. You accept emotional behavior you once would have rejected immediately. You tolerate inconsistency because occasional affection still temporarily revives hope. You lower standards just to preserve emotional access. And the frightening part is how normal this starts feeling after enough time passes. You celebrate basic attention. A fast reply suddenly feels emotionally rewarding. One affectionate night repairs weeks of emotional neglect. One moment of reassurance resets your willingness to tolerate confusion again. That's how emotional dependency traps people. Not through constant pain. Through intermittent emotional relief. And intermittent relief is psychologically devastating because it keeps hope alive. You start surviving on emotional crumbs while pretending the relationship still feels whole. That's the part people rarely admit publicly. Sometimes attachment slowly turns people into quieter versions of themselves. You speak less freely. You suppress needs to avoid appearing emotionally difficult. You stop bringing up problems because emotional distance already feels dangerous enough. You begin monitoring your own emotions before expressing them. And eventually, you realize you're trying not to disturb someone you once felt safe around. That realization breaks something internally. Because emotional safety disappearing slowly feels different than rejection. It feels like being emotionally erased in increments. Small enough to deny. Painful enough to destroy you anyway. Attention changes before love admits it. And most people notice the shift long before the relationship officially ends. They feel it in energy first. In delayed enthusiasm. In disappearing curiosity. In the absence of emotional urgency. Because people notice absence faster than presence. Especially emotional absence. That's why emotionally detached people often hold more power without trying. The less emotionally dependent person controls the emotional atmosphere almost automatically. And the more emotionally attached person starts shrinking themselves trying to preserve connection. That imbalance creates quiet humiliation. You overanalyze their tone. You replay conversations late at night searching for signs things are changing. You become relieved over things that once felt ordinary. And slowly, your emotional stability starts depending on someone else's consistency. That's when attachment becomes dangerous. Not because loving someone is weak. Because emotional dependency makes people abandon themselves for reassurance. You start tolerating uncertainty you secretly hate. You ignore emotional instincts to protect hope. You remain emotionally available to people who only appear emotionally invested when they sense distance growing. And that creates one of the darkest emotional realizations people experience. Sometimes people become more emotionally attentive once they feel you emotionally slipping away. Not because they suddenly value you more. Because humans react strongly to disappearing access. People stop chasing what feels guaranteed. That truth feels cruel because everyone has experienced it from one side or the other. Sometimes you were the person desperately waiting for attention. Sometimes you were the person slowly adapting to someone's constant presence. And most people never admit how quickly certainty changes emotional perception. Especially in modern relationships where endless attention exists everywhere. New conversations. New validation. New emotional stimulation. Someone is always available. Someone is always curious. Someone new always notices the parts people around you stopped reacting to months ago. And that reality quietly destroys emotional permanence. Because loyalty requires resisting constant emotional novelty. Most people struggle doing that consistently. Especially when familiarity removes emotional intensity. That's why attention means almost nothing without consistency attached to it. Someone can desire your presence temporarily and still never protect your emotional stability. Someone can intensely pursue you and still emotionally disappear once access feels secure. Someone can make you feel unforgettable, while quietly preparing themselves to emotionally outgrow you. And usually you notice too late. After your mood already depends on them. After your confidence already changed around them. After you already started measuring your emotional worth through their reactions. That's the terrifying part. Not losing someone. Losing yourself trying to remain emotionally important to them. Because attachment changes behavior quietly. You become more patient with disrespect. More tolerant of inconsistency. More afraid of silence. More emotionally grateful for things that should have remained basic. And eventually you stop recognizing how emotionally small you've become inside the relationship. That's the hidden damage attention creates when people mistake it for loyalty. You emotionally invest based on intensity instead of consistency. You trust emotional excitement more than emotional stability. You believe being deeply noticed means being deeply valued. Until one day you realize attention was only ever temporary emotional focus. Not devotion. Not restraint. Not permanence. And the most painful part is how long people keep loving the memory of attention long after the emotional loyalty disappeared. Because attention creates emotional addiction. But loyalty reveals itself quietly. In consistency. In restraint. In repeated emotional choice after novelty fades. And most people don't recognize the difference until they've already attached themselves to someone emotionally unstable. That's usually where the real loneliness begins. Not when someone leaves. When they slowly stop emotionally seeing you, while still keeping you close enough to stay attached. And that kind of emotional confusion stays inside people for years. If this felt uncomfortably familiar, subscribe for more psychological explorations of human behavior.